Hey everybody, this is Russ from Retro Game Core. Today I want to talk about the Nintendo Switch 2 reveal, which was more like a confirmation because we have seen so many leaks over the past few weeks, and really this new trailer that was released earlier this morning is just a confirmation of all the stuff that we had already been hearing about previously. Now generally I don't make news videos, but every once in a while something will pop up that I think is worth discussing, and I think this is one of them because, like it or not, the Switch 2 will probably be the biggest handheld release of the year. And there's definitely some information that's worth picking apart, and that's what we're going to do here in this video. And so without any further delay, let's go ahead and get started. Okay, let's start by talking about my own experience with the Switch 2, because I did get my hands on one of those 3D printed models that you may have seen floating around. Last week when I was at CES, a company that makes Switch accessories, they're called Genki, they invited me over to their booth to check out something that they had. And it turns out that through whatever channel they have in terms of just getting this information, they had all of the specs of the Nintendo Switch 2, and they had created their own 3D printed model. Now obviously this is not the real thing, but it was pretty neat to be able to get my hands on this and just get a feel for what the Switch 2 is going to be like in terms of just shape and size. And as you can imagine, it is a bigger device, so it does feel a little bit more comfortable if you ask me, just in terms of being able to wrap my hands around it, although it still has that same flat feeling that we've come to expect from the original Switch. But overall, it had the same general Switch layout, just a little bit bigger. So we had the sticks in the same place, same thing with the buttons, and the D-pad again is just going to be buttons again. So my big takeaway from that experience was that, yeah, it's going to be pretty similar to the regular Switch, although they will have magnetic attachments with the Joy-Cons, and Genki's already kind of thinking of solutions for that. They're already working on a grip attachment for this Switch 2, which has a little hinge thing on each side, so you'll be able to unlatch it and then pull the Joy-Con out if you'd like. And the nice thing about this case is that it will provide some added grip to the back of it, maybe making it a little bit more ergonomic. Either way, that was my experience with it last week at CES, and so now let's talk about the trailer and what we learned and what we still don't know. I'm going to go into this assuming that you already watched the 2-minute trailer. I'll leave a link down below in case you hadn't, but let's talk about what we learned from it. Number one, it's very obvious that the new Switch 2 is going to be larger in size, is going to have a bigger screen, so no surprise there. And we also learned that the attachment for these Joy-Cons probably is going to be magnetic, definitely not a slide attachment. The big rub here is whether or not those magnets are going to be nice and strong and hold it into place so it doesn't feel kind of wonky or creaky like it does with a Nintendo Switch over time. We also learned that there's going to be two USB-C ports on this one, so your typical bottom one, which will be used for the dock, but there's going to be one up top as well, so that might be really handy when it comes to accessories. The kickstand has also been redesigned. This is something that I had heard some rumblings about previously, but you can see that it now has a U-shaped design. I really like it. Number one, it just looks nice. I think it's really well designed, but then also I love the fact that it goes back almost 180 degrees. This is one of my favorite angles to play at when I'm playing at a table, and so I really like that they have this option here with the Switch because I've used it before with accessories for the Steam Deck. We also saw that the Joy-Cons look to be capable of mouse mode. They're sliding around on the desk here in the trailer, and I think this is what it means. I do have some reservations about the sturdiness of this setup, so we'll just have to trust the Nintendo engineering team that they figured that part out. It'll also be really interesting to see what it's like from a software perspective and how this is going to be working in a game. We'll talk about that more in a minute. And finally, the other thing that we just kind of got a confirmation about is that this device will be backwards compatible. So they had a little screen at the end that said that yes, you'll be able to put your Nintendo Switch cartridges inside the Switch 2. What's interesting is that they didn't show the Switch 2 cartridges, so we don't know if they're going to use the same slot or if there's going to be some sort of physical mechanism that separates it from the Switch 1 cartridge, kind of like how the 3DS cartridges had a little piece of plastic to prevent you from using it in a regular DS, and so maybe we'll see something like that. Now also of note, in the small text they mentioned that certain titles will not be compatible with the Nintendo Switch 2, and so I think this is probably going to have to do with the Joy-Cons themselves and accessories. So for example, the Ring Fit Adventure game, it's got that ring, you put your Joy-Con inside of it, that's not going to fit with the Switch 2 one. Same thing with, like Labo, if you ever used one of those where you make a VR mask, that may not work either. And really, I think that's about it in terms of what we learned, other than also the title. It's now being called the Switch 2, which I actually think is a good move. We'll talk about that again later in the video. So now let's talk about some of the things that we just don't know yet. I think we've got a better idea just because of this trailer, but I still have a bunch of questions. The first has to do with the right Joy-Con. There's a little button at the bottom of it, and no one's really been able to figure that out. Some people say that it brings up a chat function, but I've also heard that it may be an IR sensor, which would kind of go hand in hand with the whole mouse mouse mode thing. So if you think about it, you could take off the Joy-Con and use it as a mouse, but then you also have that IR sensor if you need to use a mouse cursor as well. We also don't really know much about the Joy-Con sticks. They look to be about the same as the previous Joy-Con sticks that we found on the Nintendo Switch, but I really hope they've at least added Hall effect sensors so that we don't have a bunch of joystick drift again. Personally, I would have loved to have seen them use a mechanism similar to what we found in some of the handhelds that I review, like the Retroids and the Odins. These have a full function, they are Hall sensor, and they are still very small. And so I was hoping we were going to get a wider range of motion, but just looking at the graphics and, the fact that they move the joysticks around a little bit in the trailer, it just doesn't look like that. It looks like the older Switch sticks. We also don't know anything about these screen specs. Like, we can assume that it's going to be 16:9 aspect ratio, but we don't know the actual size. I would guess probably somewhere around 8 inches. And then also we don't know the resolution. So is it going to be a 1080p resolution screen? And then when you dock it, is it going to go up to 4K or 1440p? And then also we don't know the type of display. Is it going to be OLED again, like the OLED Switch, or are they going to knock it down to LCD in order to save on costs? We also have no idea what kind of performance to expect from this. Obviously, it's going to be an improvement over the current Switch, but how much of an improvement? Are we going to really be able to play games that are about at that PS4 level, or is it going to be something a little bit more truncated? And I think a big component of that is actually going to be the dock and its overall performance, because we only really saw a very quick glimpse of the dock and only from the front. Now, in full disclosure, at CES last week, I did see some pictures of the proposed dock, and it looked like it was taken like in a Chinese factory. And so it looked pretty legit, and it was a lot thicker than you may expect, especially on the back. And I'm not sure what's going on in the back there. Is it a really big heatsink or a fan? Or is there some other thing going on, like an external GPU or some other gimmick? We really don't know. And so I think that there is a lot going on with the dock that we just don't know yet. And I think that it was all kind of hidden behind the graphics that we saw within that trailer. We also don't know how it's going to work in terms of compatibility. Can you use the Switch 2 in a Switch 1 dock? Are we going to be able to see third-party docks as well? As it stands right now, I do think that there is probably some other gimmick with the Nintendo Switch 2 that we just haven't heard about yet. And I don't know if it has to do with that IR sensor on the bottom, or if it has to do with the dock and how thick it is in the back, but we will probably learn more about it. But my guess here is that there's probably one other trick up Nintendo's sleeve. And I think another thing that will help us understand the type of hardware we're working with in terms of performance in the dock is going to be the final retail price. The original Switch launched at $300, and then the OLED model came out at $350 a few years later, and so I'm expecting it somewhere around that price range, probably closer to $350, but I would be surprised if they went all the way up to $400. After all, the Switch has always been geared towards a more casual and younger audience, and $400 for a gaming console, while not that bad compared to other handhelds that I review on this channel, is still a lot of money for a family to expect to pay. And then finally, something to bring all this together in terms of the price and performance and whatnot are the games that are going to be playable. All we saw was a glimpse of a Mario Kart game, and we have no idea if this is like Mario Kart 9 or just an upgraded version of Mario Kart 8. It's really hard to tell. I know there have been some investigators sleuthing through, and they figured out that like the Donkey Kong model is from the movie, so it's upgraded from Mario Kart 8. They also found that there's like spots for 24 racers on the track, and so apparently that means that there might be additional multiplayer functions. So we really don't know, but it is kind of interesting that they chose to show off Mario Kart with the Nintendo Switch 2 reveal, which makes me think that it might be a launch title. So now that we've gone over, what we know and what we don't know, let's talk about some of my own personal feelings about it and what I'm expecting and what I'm excited about. The first thing is that the Nintendo Switch 2 feels iterative and not revolutionary. By that, I mean that it's just an additional number from the original Switch. And we've never really seen that from Nintendo. We have the Nintendo, then the Super Nintendo, then the Nintendo 64. But this one literally is saying, hey, here's the Switch and the second version of it. And honestly, I think it's probably a smart move in today's market. If you think about the PlayStation model, they just make the PlayStation 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then they add additional functionality and additional power to it, but it's a household name. People know that when the PlayStation 6 comes out, it's going to be bigger and better than the PlayStation 5. And I think this goes right into the heart of the casual consumer market, because if you're thinking about yourself as a parent, and you want to buy a gift for your children, then they already have the Nintendo Switch, they love it, and then the Switch 2 comes out. It's just a very comforting purchase at that point, because you can assume that it's going to be very similar to what they already know. If you think about the transition from the Wii to the Wii U, that was a lot more confusing. Back at that time, I was a very casual gamer, and I really didn't understand the difference between the Wii and the Wii U at the time, and so I found no incentive to actually pick it up. If it was the Wii 2 and it was understood that it had better graphics and everything else, I might have been more likely to actually buy it, but I didn't. It also gets away from that weird naming convention they used with the 3DS, like the new 3DS XL, all that stuff that came out. That was also very confusing for just a casual market, myself included. So I do like the fact that it's a very simple upgrade. We're just going from Switch to Switch 2, and the fact that everything's backwards compatible makes it very easy for those casual purchases. And if they're going to be targeting the 100 million or whatever they sold of the Nintendo Switch, then it makes sense that they're trying to go that route instead. Now, the one gimmick that we've got a pretty good guess about, which is going to be that mouse mode as well as the IR sensor on the right Joy-Con, this can actually open up a potential new world when it comes to gaming. If you think about some of those older Nintendo Switch consoles and titles, many of them relied on pointer controls. So if you think about like the Wii and the Wii U and even the DS and 3DS, all of those were enhanced by touch input. And if the IR sensor and mouse mode works as I'm expecting, then there is a potential to have backwards compatibility with those titles, and I think that would be great. Now, in another show of goodwill, if Nintendo actually made their older eShop purchases available within the Nintendo Switch store, that would be amazing. So for example, if you had the same Nintendo Switch account profile, or you could merge them between the two, and then you could access some of those older eShop titles now that they've closed those stores, that would be a really nice show of goodwill from Nintendo. I'm not expecting it. I would honestly think that they would probably go the opposite route and charge you all over again, but it would be really cool, and they've got an opportunity to do that. Now, another question I've been getting a lot is whether or not I plan on buying the Switch 2 or showcasing it on my channel. And this all has to do with the fact that I've had some Nintendo strikes recently on my channel, which have now thankfully expired, but it still leaves me in a kind of weird spot. And the way I see it is as a just general user and as a family man, like I do plan on buying the Switch 2. It's the console my kids play the most. And so I do want to upgrade it. I want to check it out. Just the gamer in me wants to see what it's like. So yeah, I'll probably be buying it and testing it out and whatnot. Now, whether or not I will actually show it on my channel is a different story. I've been thinking that I will probably just do a review of the hardware. So, taking a look at the buttons and the ergonomics, things like that, and all the stuff that I really focus on my channel, like I can probably still do that and have no problem with it. Emulation and all that, let's not touch that subject. Anyway, that's really about it for this video. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. I think that this trailer altogether was a little bit on the boring side, but I don't know, there's something always exciting about a new Nintendo product launch. I've been there from the NES and forward, and so it's always really cool to see what they're going to come up with next. And, they're very cryptic about things, which is very exciting as well. As always, thank you for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe if you found this helpful, and we will see you next time. Happy gaming.